everybody. Welcome to our next episode of Future Focus CXOs. I have a very exciting guest today. He has gone through a job transition, which I think you all would love to hear about. His name is Rudy Zabran. He is currently the COO for Consolidated Analytics. So without any further delay, let me welcome Rudy to our podcast. I would request you to give a little deeper introduction about yourself and also talk about what does Consolidated Analytics do.
Thank you, Jay and Steve, for having me on. I'm going to enjoy some time with you guys today. I'm Rudy Zabran. I'm the Chief Operating Officer currently at Consolidated Analytics. Came into this seat from previously being the Chief Revenue Officer. I think we'll talk about that maybe a little bit at some point. Consolidated Analytics, the way to think about it today is a diversified provider of tech-enabled services to mostly the mortgage industry. Really the debt markets more holistically, but the mortgage industry predominantly. There are four distinct verticals within our business line. We do valuation services, which is things like property inspections and appraisals and a variety of products for capital markets, secondary and structured finance and investment banking and servicing and so on and so forth. We have a due diligence division, which is really like a audit, if you will, of mortgage loan files that are ultimately being bought as whole loans and subsequently securitized. And those mortgage loan files take a variety of different forms and have morphed over time from subprime era when I started my career to now alternative type products, non-QM, and we can talk about those at some point as well. We have a consulting and advisory practice within our company where we engage with lenders and banks and credit unions to do programmatic rollouts of loan origination systems, servicing platforms. We manage those projects. We implement new technologies for them. And then all the things that kind of run off from there, maybe testing and training, policy and procedure development. It could be just optimization using both technology and just process workflows. That's our advisory and consulting practice. And then we've got this big bucket that we refer to as BPS. And in BPS, there are a variety of services where we support folks that are engaged in mortgage lending with kind of outsourced activities. Clients will come to us to do any number of manufacturing type functions. So in one regard for origination, that might be licensed underwriting and processing, which are SAFE Act licensed activities. There are regulations that require licenses for that. We're licensed in 40 states to do those things. And there's all these post-closing things that happen as well, which require a lender to register a loan with FHA, for example, to get a valid insurance certificate. We call that government insuring, or working with investors to clear up trailing docs and final docs, and working with the collateral, the mortgage, the note, making sure all these things are recorded, and that chain of document, that doc chain is ultimately complete. That's one area of BPS. And then the other is really default services. So for us, that's REO, asset management. We manage properties that have ultimately been foreclosed on and need to be liquidated. We do some rental management in that regard as well. We work with clients who have a borrower that's in place on a foreclosed loan, where we help them manage the property and collect rents and keep that borrower, ultimately what was a borrower, in place in a rental capacity. And then with that, sometimes when we liquidate homes, we have to put it through auction. We have a technology platform called Home Sale, which is our auction platform. Then we do a variety of other things. We support servicers in the default space with loss mitigation setup, default underwriting, and a variety of other things that happen there. And we do all that not only with people, bodies, and seats, but in each area of the business, we've teched it up, if you will, and built technologies that ultimately support it. Long story short, we're a diversified provider to mostly the mortgage industry. We capture every client type that exists within that realm.
So that's it? That's all? You just do those few things, right?
We do a lot of different things. We got a great team, a lot of diversified experience within the group. So
that obviously had to evolve. We definitely want to get into that a little bit later, how the evolution of all those opportunities evolved into the business.
Sure.
But have you always been in the mortgage business, or how did you get into it as your personal journey? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my path to the mortgage industry maybe was a little bit different than some, although I'd say I don't think a lot of people grow up thinking, hey, I want to be in the mortgage space when they're young. I don't think they have that, generally speaking, as a life goal. But I grew up in a family business to start off with. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, and he owned a handful of shoe stores across the Midwest in the Chicagoland area predominantly. At some point, I worked in his shoe stores from the time I was a little kid, like stocking shelves and running back to the back to get a pair of shoes if somebody was in the store, and sweeping floors and that sort of thing. But over time, as the big box retailers started to really gain traction in strip malls, call it back in the late 80s and early 90s, My grandfather had this idea that they needed to be able to compete with the big box stores, and he started this company called National Independent Retailers, which was a buying group. So he
Mhm.
created a conglomerate of local independent retailers that could go and have the buying might to go and place large volume orders with the big guys, so that they could compete when the big box stores went into sale mode and started miking prices down and things like that. At the higher price that a typical independent retailer would buy those shoes, they couldn't afford the margin hit that they would take. So the buying group really gave them the ability to compete. And that started as a thing in the Midwest called Midwest Independent Retailers or something like that. And then it expanded nationally and it got pretty big. Over time, my roles developed. In high school, I'm working sweeping floors in his warehouse as that business grew. And eventually he shuttered all the shoe stores and made that his thing. And I was a part of that. We established a number of brands, Bianco and Talia and walking cradles and a variety of things. And eventually I found an opportunity outside of that with a national shoe brand called Candy Shoe Company that was run by Neil Cole, who's the brother of Kenneth Cole. It was a big brand back in the 90s. Eventually that took me to Steve Madden, where I worked for a period of time. Long story short, when those roles, it was really crash course in sales eventually as I moved into the major kind of shoe distributors, Candies and Steve Madden, figuring out relationship management and understanding what makes people buy. It was a fast-paced environment. You're traveling all the time. You're doing these fashion expos and all these various things and selling things. That was great. My grandfather ended up having some health problems and was getting ready to sell his business. And I went back to work for him to close things down. This would have been the very late 90s, maybe 99, early 2000. And we had some people walk into our office to buy office furniture. And I didn't know them at the time, but I guess they were acquainted to me through my aunt who was doing bookkeeping for them. And they had a company called American Mortgage Consultants. And they asked me at
Okay.
that point as they walked into my office, we've heard good things about you. Have you ever thought about being in the mortgage industry? And I said, no, don't know anything about it. Didn't own a home at the time even. They said, why don't you come in on Monday and interview with us and we'll see if it's something you might like to do. And I had a job offer in St. Louis at the time. I was going to move down there and take a job down there, which was fine. It was going to be a decent job. But I went in on Monday morning to this American Mortgage Consultant's office and met with a partner here in my company today, Joe Andrea. And we still remain tight together. And they offered me a job on the spot. And my first question was, what am I going to do? What are you going to pay me? And just try to get some more information about it. So they basically took me back to a back office. It was a small company at the time. It's now known as Citus AMC. It's a relatively large company at this point. But they sat me down in front of a box of files, gave me a rubber thumb and some labels and said, hey, here's these 10 documents we need you to mark, flip through the files and go tag those documents. And that was the start of it. And I think that was December of 2000.
They bought your desk and took you with it.
I never really thought about it that way, but that's ultimately what ended up happening. I suppose that's right.
I love it.
In this current job, please, you went through a lot of role changes, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about what's like being a CRO to a CEO transition. What are those personal or professional characteristics that influenced this change?
Yeah, for me, the adaptability in executive capacity has always been key. Every role I've taken on has required like some ability or willingness to learn, to adjust, to execute things quickly. When you move from one role to the next, the core requirements of those roles don't necessarily change. You need to continue to be decisive and not overanalyze, trust your gut a little bit and your knowledge, and have the right people around you to make informed decisions and own those decisions. The surrounding yourself with the right people has been a huge part of that, whether it's sales, having the right sales team around you and executive leaders around you, having the right ops guy that can execute on behalf of the sales team and all those types of things. That's how you grow and you challenge one another. The sales has to hold the operations accountable. Operations has to live up to the standards of the client. I think I understand that pretty well. Understanding that big picture, whether it's selling shoes, automating mortgage loan files, building technologies. You always need to look beyond the day-to-day tasks and understand the big picture so you can bring all those things together. I think I've done that, generally speaking, throughout my career. I've sat on the operations side of it, while in the shoe business, I was more on the sales side. When I sat at that desk with my rubber thumb, started flipping through sheets of paper, all of a sudden I became an operator, right? And the growth in that job was a lot of hard work and determination. You got to be motivated and all those types of things. But I think there's also an element of it where you have to be curious. So as I went through those documents, I could have just said, hey, this says this is the note at the top or this is the mortgage at the top. That was never enough for me. I always had to read the document. I wanted to understand what it meant, how it worked in the broader context of the mortgage loan file. And then eventually why all that matters. Why are we doing the work that we're doing? Why does an investor care about this document? How does this chain of documents affect the loan downstream and those types of things? I think that's the operation mindset, being a little bit curious and wanting to know how things work. And then I grew up in the sales environment, whether it was on my grandfather's shoe store floors or traveling around the country at shoe expos and those types of things. So for me, it's been natural. I underwrote files at one point. I did that operational stuff. I've been in a capacity in this mortgage due diligence space, which is much broader now, but for 20 years. So a lot of experience I've been able to bring to bear in both the sales and the operations environment.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
let me ask you, let me pivot on this. Obviously, your companies have been moving quickly. It sounds like you started, you, three other guys, here's your rubber stamp, go. Obviously, you can't have this kind of product set in your current, where you currently are without having gone through a lot of growth. But you use a lot of data. It sounds like you've really adopted a lot of data to build these platforms. So can you talk about some of the big data solutions you've been using for your services? Maybe give us a specific example of how that's enhanced your decision making as a COO and improved the outcomes with your organization.
Yeah, so let me explain the data environment more holistically. So in each of those core four verticals that I talked about, valuations, due diligence, advisory and consulting, and we'll call it BPS or fulfillment, we collect a lot of data, right? So if I'm a valuation vendor, I'm creating appraisals every day, and appraisals have hundreds of fields and hundreds of rules and of varying different types. As we create these appraisals, we're creating a uniform data set that goes along with it. And that data resides then in our data warehouse and we store it. If I'm looking at due diligence and mortgage loan files, a ton of data as well. Now I have the entire picture of the credit, regulatory compliance, property, and legal package that underlies a loan. I have data on how the borrower was qualified, what their credit criteria was, their income, because we're making an assessment of whether or not the loan met underwriting guidelines, assets, liabilities, all those types of things. It's thousands of data fields in due diligence. So basically the entire loan package, you got to collect that data, you analyze that data, determine whether or not a loan meets not only standards for an investor, but also for securitization and regulatory compliance requirements, all these types of things. So tons of
to make something that fits with 20 other loans, they all have to look the same. They have to have similar profiles. And so you have to gather and manage and assess all that data. So what have you moved into to get those automations?
Yeah, so we've done a variety of things on the automation side. On the big data side, as we've collected that, we've then started to augment it or enrich that data. So we collect this data and then we have data partners. So we go out and we buy massive amounts of data from the market. We get market intelligence data. We augment our existing mine data, for lack of a better term, and then we build products for it. So for example, the most recent product, we acquired an automated valuation company last year called Real Info, and we've now taken that algorithm, that AVM algorithm, we've added a new data set to it, and we've continued to double down in that space. We're developing other data and analytics products around property characteristics, appraisal bias, and a variety of other things that become necessary to the market. Once you have the data, there are limits in how you can use it ultimately, but you can get pretty creative and devise new ways of adding value to the clients beyond the general utility of the service that we provide. And we're big believers in adding value beyond the utility of just the general product or service that we provide. In a big data sense, that's it. We've obviously done a number of other things, less on the data side, but more on the automation side to drive the growth of the company as well. Those are different technology products.
When we talk about data, I think the obvious question today is about AI. AI is very broad, like there is predictive analytics to Gen AI to now agentic AI. Like a lot of things have come up. So are you using any AI? What is your AI roadmap, and which areas in your business you truly feel that AI will give you an ROI?
Yeah, I think the AI roadmap is interesting because I think it's ever evolving. I think as we continue to dive deep into our businesses and systems and processes, we're finding new ways to deploy those types of technologies all the time. To your point about what does it mean to be an artificial intelligence, I think that the term gets thrown around a lot. And in some capacity, people are talking about like more old school technologies, OCR and RPA, and they're calling them AI. I think for the layman out there that here's the term AI today, they're thinking more about LLMs because of ChatGPT, Gemini, and all those things making big news headlines. For us, the journey really started specific to AI in the document recognition, classification, and data extraction space. The original journey we went down was really traditional OCR and RPA type bots that were identifying documents, classifying them, and going through some type of data extraction tools. Now, when you're utilizing template-based OCR, there are limitations. The amount of training that's ultimately required is fairly robust. Every time a new document type comes in, regardless of how you classified things previously, it may require some adjusting. It just breaks more often. There's more breaks, less reliability, generally speaking. At some point a few years ago, I think a couple years ago when ChatGPT first rolled out, we did a little pilot. We set up a little program and we said, hey, you know what'll be interesting? Let's just drop a couple of documents in here and then prompt it and see what it can tell us about the documents, right? So we went and we dropped a handful of mortgage loan documents in a mini program that we had created and said, hey, what can you tell us about the document? Didn't prompt it for specific details, just said, hey, what can you tell us about the document? And we were amazed. It came back with all these key value pairs that we would have trained OCR hundreds of times over to come back with. We said, okay, here's a copy of a note. What can you tell us about it? And the key value pairs were, here's the loan amount, here's the property address, here's the borrower name, here's the interest rate, here's the default provision, here's the late charge provision. It's signed by so-and-so. And we went, wow, we didn't have to train it to do that. We just asked it what it knew about it, and it went and grabbed some of those key values. So I think that's when the light bulb really went off that, okay, this is going to be a way easier technology for us to manage long-term in terms of our step one classification, step two data extraction, and that data drives all of our rules. And we haven't got to the point where AI is making decisions yet. And part of that is a regulatory framework required. The rating agencies that ultimately rate these publicly rated securitizations, there is a requirement for the work that we do, and they call TPR work, third-party review work, and it requires a human. There's a whole framework for experience level and all these things that are required to make decisions. So where we're utilizing AI today is really in identifying documents, classifying documents, extracting data, and we're still on that roadmap. But we're using a bunch of models today, and we're continue to evolve and add more. Some of the documents are still in traditional OCR models. So our project 3, which we're working on right now, is transitioning all OCR models to these new AI models, if you will. And it's going great. It's all across the board. It's easier. I think subsequent to that will be, how do we write more rule sets in AI through neural networks and be able to take some of the decision-making, not off the underwriter per se, but to remove some of the potential error. The human element ultimately contributes to the equation. So that's next. And we're looking at AI in each area of the business, right? Whether it's valuation services, you could be using agents for chat and scheduling and all these other things, to due diligence, which is the document classification and data extraction and decisioning, through our advisory and consulting practice, where we're helping people understand these technologies and ultimately implement them. And we're able to leverage our own experience in that world as we provide guidance to them.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's very insightful to understand how companies are actually really using it for business purpose. There is a lot of hype, a lot of excitement. We try ChatGPT a lot, but what is the real ROI on the business? So thanks for sharing.
I'll tell you, the easiest thing to use it for, without question, is some of the marketing support, right? Where we used to sit down and write a white paper, a case study. Now we can get in and you're going to define all the terms of what you're trying to come up with, but it's not like you have a copywriter now that's sitting there and having to write all the copy for you. I personally can get in there and in 5 minutes, I can say, look, here's the 4 core parameters of the case study. Here was the outcome. Here's the target market. We're so much more effective, I think, even from a sales and marketing perspective, because we can do those things. Our contracts have been updated. We write these pretty robust scopes for the work that we do. It really needs to be defined so that the industry understands when they make a public disclosure of what is due diligence, for example. The scope is laid out and people understand the things that were the tasks that we're executing. And we've used AI to strengthen our scope document, make it more understandable, even condense it a little bit. It does a great job of taking like these big thoughts and breaking them down into more finite bullet points that are easier to understand. So we found a variety of ways to use it. We're tinkering every single day. We've got a great team that's working on it. So we're really excited about what it continue to offer to the business.
One thing that I hear from a lot of my customers is the cost aspect of AI, because it is all a transaction-based model, right? So talk to us about how you are controlling cost, or how you are measuring cost, and how are you making it a more predictive model when it comes to usage of AI in your organization?
That might be a better question suited for my technology team. I don't know that I can get all the way into the weeds on that. I will say this. I think part of the initial push when we started building out some of our classification and data extraction method, part of the reason we went the OCR path versus OCR and RPA versus jumping straight into LLMs and machine learning was because of cost. I think that was 3 years ago at this point, or more than that, maybe now. And the reality is the compute cost and the cost of AI continues to drop year over year. I think the scale down of those costs over time and understanding that they're going to get cheaper over time, particularly as new developments are made, I think was a light bulb that said, hey, we need to do something here. We don't want to be on the other outside looking in. We have to be at the forefront of this journey, not only because it's where the industry is going, but it's making us smarter, better, and faster, generally speaking. I think it's reducing error, the potential for error, and it's certainly increasing our turn times. Like when clients send us deals, so a lot of times these big bulk pools that trade, it might be 2,000 loans. And if I've got to manually sit there and have a body at a desk, extract 2,500 data fields from a loan file, the turn time on that 2,000 loans, it might be a month or something like that. Everybody wants it in 2 weeks, by the way. So whether it's 2,000 loans or 6,000 loans, everybody wants it in 2 weeks. Utilizing the capabilities that artificial intelligence and the tools that we've built in our platform called Loan DNA afford us, we're getting a ton of scale at a high degree of accuracy. And we're really happy with where that Loan DNA platform has brought us today.
And I think, again, it might be a very good conversation with your IT team. But one thing that I hear from customers, I've not seen anybody really do it yet, because the way democratization of AI is happening, open source models are coming in. There are so many different models, right? I don't need a very high tech model because if my use case is very simple. So what people are also looking at is saying that, can I get a mini model as an open source model, host it myself? So I don't pay this transactional cost, I only pay compute cost, and do this specific use case. So instead of going for OpenAI's 4.0 or for the Pro plan, that is one way of really people are looking, very smart way of thinking about it. If you really think about it, for example, DeepSeek has given you all open source. Actually download that, scale it down, put it on your own cloud, private cloud really. And actually now you have full LLM capability for that specific application as an agent who can just do value pairs for your document, for example. It doesn't need reasoning capability. It doesn't need a lot of other things. So that also is something I heard which can reduce this transactional cost, make it more predictable. More importantly, privacy is another problem. I don't want my data to go out.
Especially in our business.
You own everything in a mortgage application.
We are secure to good luck trying to get into this office at some point. It's Fort Knox around here. But yeah, Jay, to your point, without a doubt, and the democratization of AI definitely seems to be the trend. I think maybe yesterday, the day before, X or Grok announced 3.0s on the horizon, and they're going to open source 2.0, and that seems to be in their roadmap. ChatGPT or OpenAI has suggested some of the same things. So I think without a doubt, that's going to continue to reduce the cost of AI adoption across industries, certainly ours. I think our industry is ripe for some improvement in the tech stacks that are ultimately used, and AI will be probably pretty transformative to it in the very near future. We've dabbled with these things like the deep research models. OpenAI, I think they only offer theirs through the Pro plan. But I think the 3.0 with Grok is supposed to have a deep research model. There's one called Perplexity out there. I think that's what it's called. That's off research for free users, up to 5 queries a month. We've toyed with that a little bit. It's pretty interesting stuff. For most our use cases, the standard mini models and things like that generally will work for most of the stuff that we do around here.
I'm going to step out of the tech a little bit. So Rudy, I want to pivot a little bit back towards you as a leader. Your company has up to 700 employees, but I know you tend to start more in an entrepreneurial small space before you grow to a company of that size. What skills did you have to develop as a leader in order to stay valuable and keep everyone moving forward?
Oh, I think when you go from a world of being a very small shop originally to a fairly large organization, the first thing you need to figure out is surrounding yourself with the right people and then delegating the proper authority and empowering the people around you and trusting in them to execute the things that you can't touch. Today, with as many people, as much business, as many clients as we have, I can't touch it all. As much as I'd like to, I do. The operations side of me from auditing loan files makes me want to get into the details of everything, but I can't.
Yeah, yeah.
Between the 4 distinct businesses and all the product lines and services under each of those businesses, there's just too much nuance to everything. What we've done is we've gone out and we've hired a fantastic management team. Each one of our business lines, valuation, we've got this guy, Chris McLean, who's a stud. He's been in the valuation space forever. Brian Adams is the president of our due diligence division, and he's fantastic. He's been in due diligence, has worked in sales capacities, and now is the head of that division, pushing sales operations. And we've got great operators there as well. Advisory and consulting, we have decades of experience in that group. It was run by a guy by the name of Steve Faulkner, who took my old role as RO, and now Melissa Hill, who's fantastic and has been side by side with Steve, and that group is running that business. And our BPS business is run by a guy by the name of Mike Chu and supported by a team in Chennai, India, ST and Danny, who run those groups. So ultimately, I highlight those names to say that those people are fantastic. We've enabled and I think empowered key leaders within our organization to take control over their businesses. These people were executives when we brought them in, and I think we've made a lot of good hires. So we have key people in seats, and we've delegated the authority to them to execute their businesses. At the corporate level, we're managing margins and trying to help support them, fix things that are breaking, enable new technology, create new products and services, and then ultimately enforcing our core values at the company. But the big thing, finding the right teammates, delegating authority, and empowering them to succeed has been really the catalyst for growth.
So who taught you that? That's what I'm getting at. I'm like,
Did you
everybody
learn
who's really
that?
good
Yeah.
at one thing knows how to do these other things naturally. Where did you figure out how to do that?
Yeah, look, I've had good mentors around me, but also I think necessity is the fuel there.
Success drove it.
It's what are you going to do? You can't touch it at some point. And then if you hire the right people, it doesn't feel so difficult. You know what I mean?
No.
Get the right people in the seat that you can trust them, and you know that you're getting the full picture, the big picture, the full truth. You can have those candid conversations. That candor is critically important, right? The taking accountability for the organization and being credible in your communications internally, being thoughtful about how you approach the business and the people within it. Those are core values of ours. And I think our leaders understand those core values, and they're the ones that have made it easy. Certainly necessity is what got us there, or got me there in particular, but the people is what made it all easy and allow you to trust in it.
And I've seen that you guys grown even by acquisition. I see
Yes.
3 major acquisitions that you have done right from 2015. And when you came in, I think 2 acquisitions had happened, right? 2017, 2019, about 10 properties, equitable mortgage solutions. Because this acquisition is easy, but merging and making sure they fit, or the culture evolves, or they fit into your culture, or you acquire a different culture. Talk to us about how you went around that experience, and who stayed, or the leaders you spoke about, are they still in those seats?
Yeah, happy to. So we remain always on the hunt for good kind of tuck-ins, businesses that would be accretive to us, both in terms of customer acquisition or complementary products, complementary technologies, those types of things. We're always on the hunt for those types of businesses that we feel like would be a good fit for us. We identified Equitable Mortgage Solutions back in 2017, which right around the time I joined, shortly thereafter. In 2015, the company had already done an acquisition of a company called OpEx Now, Operational Excellence, which is now the advisory and consulting practice. We've rolled things in, and then they become the practice. So it was a valuation firm originally. Arvin and Brian, 2 of our partners here, did the acquisition of OpEx Now in 2015. Me and my partner from a prior company, John Drea, joined in 2017, realized we had some work to do, did an acquisition of Equitable Mortgage Solutions. Then, to your point, in 2019, we acquired Carrington Property Services and worked with a couple of private equity guys to help execute that transaction. Have done a couple of since then, Real Info. I had a tuck-in of a commercial valuation company, so on and so forth. So we've been really opportunistic in that regard, looked for the right opportunities that we thought were accretive to the business, like I said, both from a product fit standpoint or customer standpoint. As we've rolled them in, we found positions for the entrepreneurs that were ultimately there. Most of those people remain in the business today. The business that we bought from Carrington Property Services certainly gone through its share of challenges. We executed that trade in 2019, And then COVID happened and there was a moratorium on foreclosures. So there was no REO ultimately to liquidate. And the business that was a fairly substantial acquisition just stopped. That whole world was just different for a period of time. Capital markets just absolutely stopped as well in due diligence. And we pivoted our focus. We went and got licensed in 40 states to do underwriting, processing, closing, and funding, and all these other things. We pivoted our business, whether it's through tuck-ins, big acquisitions, or otherwise, we just remain focused on being nimble. We've now purposely built the business where in each segment, valuations, due diligence, advisory, and BPS, we have products both for servicing, capital markets, and any other part of that mortgage value chain. As the market kind of shifts, whether it's origination focused right now because the interest rate environment is right, or whether it's servicing focused because origination volumes are down, we can just adjust our focus and we point our people and our products and services to whatever the flavor of the day is. The acquisitions have been a core part of that strategy and have helped us do that.
That is unique actually, because a lot of people leave once they get acquired. They get bored 2-3 years max, they leave. But you guys have made sure the entrepreneurs stay, run that practice, and make them successful. That's a very beautiful culture that you guys have.
Yeah, in large part, there's so much tribal knowledge that these folks build up over time when they start a business. And I don't know that we would acquire the business if the wrong leaders were at the forefront of it. We don't necessarily want to run it all for them. Certainly, we want to bring things in and figure out how to optimize cost, whether that's in HR or finance and sales. You can optimize all these costs naturally when you do M&A type transactions, but the people are the critical part. The people are the day-to-day workers, those managers and things like that are executing the tasks. They are really the lifeblood of the business. So our job is really to bring those people in, embrace them within our culture, and then help make those businesses more profitable, but also add a bunch of technology to it. Figure out how to tech them up a little bit so that they can really hum.
Nice. Hey, last question. We always ask this for everybody. What advice would you give to other people aspiring to work their way into the C-suite? I know you've done both the CRO and the COO, which is an odd pivot. Don't think many are going to be able to pull that one off. But for the most part, what advice you typically give people as they're trying to build up their soft skills of being a better leader?
I think the table stakes stuff is always there, right? You have to be driven. You got to put in the time. There's just no substitute for the time. If you were to walk through the office, generally speaking, any significant business, the leaders tend to be there quite a bit, right? You walk in on a Saturday, the leadership is there. So table stakes is the time investment, the commitment, and the drive to be in that position. Then I would say for me, it's been about curiosity. I've wanted to understand the big picture of things. I've never been one to say, okay, here's my day-to-day task. I'm just going to head down and execute my day-to-day task. Don't get me wrong. There's times to head down when a loan file or head down in a spreadsheet and just grind because there's a task that needs to be completed. But understanding the big picture of how things work, why they work, who's influenced by the decisions that we make, why are these things required? That big picture understanding is really what's given me the opportunity to sit in the seat that I am today, being adaptable to changing environments, not allowing challenges to beat you down to the point where you can't get up and stay on course. So particularly in the entrepreneur journey, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be roadblocks. You're going to be met with wind at your face. And the reality is that in those challenging times, you just have to stay focused. Focused on that next step, focused on that next activity, focus on that next customer, and ultimately you get through it. There's a saying, people don't trip over mountains. It's the small pebbles that make us stumble. We get caught up on those little small pebbles and we'll never make our way through the minefield. Keep charging through all that. Someday you look back, you've crossed the mountain and the sky is blue and the grass is green.
Very cool. Thank you. I think it's a great advice. I enjoyed talking to you, Rudy. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Any last thoughts before we conclude the podcast?
Not much, Dad. I appreciate you guys taking the time. It was great to meet you guys. And Jay, I got a little bit of feedback from Steve about the broader things that you guys do. Steve shares a little bit of our mortgage background. I think he had mentioned at one point he maybe did some LO work. He might be happy to be out of it now, but it is a business that's changing and is certainly ripe for change, and a business that I'm proud to be a part of today. So
thank you.